Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Superman and Lois Season 3, Episode 2. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, let's start off with Lois's side of things. Obviously, you could tell, she got some pretty bad news. It was like, oh, she found out, and sadly, it's such a, complete 180 from last episode, because it's like, right, she thought maybe she was pregnant, and her and Clark were, dealing with the notions of that, and we're very happy about it, and now we're getting the other side of things. We end up finding out, sadly, that Lois has former breast cancer, and just like how she's dealing with that. She hasn't told anyone, because obviously she wanted to process it herself first, but you could tell she was just kind of putting on this smile and kind of not necessarily fully going on autopilot, but she was kind of off in her own world. And Clark could tell something was up, but he didn't want to push her, just being like, no, when you're ready to talk about it, just know I'm here. I'm always going to be here for you. And that's what makes this situation even suckier. It's like, I'm one of the most powerful people on this planet, if not the most powerful person on this planet, considering we know, hey, there are no other Supermans that only go-to in this world, on this particular Earth. And it's like, yeah, this is something I can't hit or punch. All I can do is just try and support my wife. It's something very that's also the effed up thing. It is something so mundane. It isn't like, oh man, she died, she's hurt because of a supervillain. It's no, the thing that can happen to anyone happens to the love of your life. What can you do? It's just life sucks like that, and it's the most sadly human way to be hurt or affected, and it's and that's something that the Kents have to, decide to, how they're going to go forward as a family with this, And Clark's like, I'm going to be there by your side. You are a strong person. Because she was like, I was afraid that if I told you, you'd look at me like that. I was someone that was, sick and dying. And it's I'm never going to look at you like that, because you are the strongest person that I know, and I'm going to continue to look at you that way this entire situation. Because she opened up to that judge who was going to, she's the one that released the guy from last episode who has the superpowers. It's right, you release him from prison. It's well, you had denied him prior, but why this time did you go ahead and release him? It's well, he was sick, but did you know he showed up with superpowers? And the moment that conversation happened, she was almost like, oh, wait, what? So she's somewhere mixed up in this, because one of Bruno's right-hand people ended up showing up to shut down that conversation. Which we'll get to the Bruno and Clark stuff, because that was really interesting. But, Lois talking the judge down when she kind of felt hey, I know what's coming and I can't stop what's coming. Because if I'm not, and this is going to be kind of a whole long diatribe, so go along with me. I think that is something, I'm not saying it's from a very specific comic, and maybe it is, but I think there was a situation in the comics where Superman has talked someone off out of jumping, because it's right, he could catch them, but it's right, it's that human connection of talking to them. And I think that's what made this situation with Lois so powerful, because obviously it's she's going through something right now and she can connect. But I think it was more important for Lois to have that moment than Superman, because yes, he could swoop in, but the problem is it's you need someone to talk you down, because if Superman just comes in, swoops in, saves the day, that doesn't deal with the underlying issue that's there with the judge. So Lois being the one to be able to talk her down, that right, you're stronger than you think you are. I know what it's facing something that, you're afraid to face, something you can't control, something that's out of your control. And that, once again, that's what makes this situation so terrible, because it's not something that Clark can fight or punch. And it's just once again, it's such a sadly normal thing that happens. Doesn't make it okay in any shape or form. It sucks, but it is such a normal thing to happen, So, but I think it pulls from a comic, because the reason why I'm saying all this, because I know, I won't get too much in spoilers, but if you've seen The Boys, there's a similar circumstance. Granted, it didn't have the same outcome. It had a way different outcome than Lois's situation this episode with talking the judge down. But I could have sworn when that happened in that episode of The Boys in this past season, in season 3, I could have sworn I remember someone referencing that almost being some kind of almost homage to like I mean, obviously it's meant to be like the twisted version of it, but it was supposed to almost be like a reference and wink and nod to Superman doing the same thing in the comics or something, like talking someone down. Obviously Homelander's supposed to be the more jacked up, like twisted version of Superman, you know, kind of like another evil Superman parallel and stuff, so. But, yeah. So there's that situation, but then there's also Bruno and Clark's situation, which I thought was really fascinating. So Bruno's just kind of like, oh, hey, Superman. So, oh, here you are. Like, everyone's had these baseless accusations of me being part of leading inner gang, but he was like, you know, I've done my best to kill those rumors, you know? And it's like, right, I know who you are. I know you had something to do with this guy, I fought last episode, having superpowers. And even him being like, right, you ended up causing, like, what, tens of millions of dollars of damage. I mean, to be fair, well, because, like, Clark led him out of, like, the heart of Metropolis, but the place he ended up landing and ended up fighting Clark was in what Bruno was like, right? Because we saw at the end of the episode, that section of Metropolis is known as like the suicide slums, because Bruno's like, this place was so bad that people were killing themselves just because this community was struggling. He's like, whereas like men like Lex Luthor and Morgan Edge were like getting so big and rich and powerful, this community was suffering. So he was like, right, this place didn't have a hero that it can count on, and I became that. And I think that's going to be an interesting element to really dive into. And it, it might be a thing of, yes, I became who I became because I needed to, because this community needed a hero. I became its hero. I helped build this community up to what it is. So I think any bad things I've ever done has been to help my community in the long run. What have you done? And I love him putting this on Superman of, you save lives. Like, you put out fires, but what real change have you made to this world? Because for him, it's like, my community, I've actually changed it. I've made it better. But what have you done? Because for him, it's the whole mentality of, what does Superman do? You come in, you swoop in, you save the day, but then you leave. That's what I was talking about before with the judge of like, yes, Clark could have easily saved her if it came down to it. But Lois being the one to talk her down, I think means more, because it's getting to the root of, like, it isn't fully like, oh, end up like, oh, like that judge's issues are resolved. It's like, no, but at least if you're able to talk her down, then you can kind of attack like the root, like at least get to some of the root of the issues. Just swooping and saving her, that's the thing. You're putting out fires, but you're not making enough change. But I think for Clark, it's like, you kind of like, you have no idea what I do. Like, the fact is, for Clark, it's like, I'm meant to be like an inspiration of hope. Once again, that, kind of, Superman represents kind of like the best of us, like, so like a shining example of like, kind of like what humanity can be, what we should kind of like, this kind of perfect model of what we could be, or something like that. I'm butchering kind of like, what Superman's kind of supposed to represent in that regard. But, I'm sure for Clark, he'd say like, I inspire hope in people. I don't want to just be but I think that's also the thing too for him. It's like, yes, but you might inspire hope in people, but not in everyone. Where it's like, you're the hope for, different people, you swoop in, save the day. But what about the aftermath? And it's like, right, my community, because your fight with Home Dude, it ended up causing tens of millions of dollars in my community. He's probably like, I'm the one fixing that. No one else did. You damaged the place up, and then you go off to the next saying, oh, here's another fire you have to go put out. Don't ever step foot in my house again, type of situation. So I thought that was such an interesting conversation between the both of them, which I felt like that was really leading down into a certain, I think it's touching on a really interesting conversation of like, yeah, not every community gets the full, like, yes, you're everywhere, but it's like, you're not there to deal with the aftermath. You're not the one who has to pick up the pieces of any, like, day in and day out. Cause, because obviously Superman swoops in, saves the day, goes on his merry way because he has his own life to lead and stuff like that. And he's got a world, like, it's all on his shoulders to look after this entire world. So I think that's going to enter some interesting conversations, this season because of that, and maybe even making Clark question, like, either doubling down in his belief of like, no, I do more than just save the day, like I inspire hope in people, but maybe the hope isn't like doesn't get perceived or at least used in the way that he hoped it would. In the regards of, yeah, he swoops in and saves the day and he thinks he gives hope to people, which he does for a little bit before that hope is kind of like, because it feels like that's what this season is going to be about too, about like hope, whether it's on the Bruno side of things, what he's able to kind of give his community, everything Lois and the family are going through with her diagnosis and everything. So finding it hard to hold on to that hope when things feel at their grimmest, you know? And that's the perfect story for a Superman, you know, story, because once again, what does that sigil represent? The House of L. It represents hope, you know? So we'll ultimately have to wait to see kind of where all that ends up going and kind of finding out what Bruno's really up to, because I think it is going to be that thing of, yes, I'm villainous, but I'm villainous for a purpose of like, I'm legitimately trying to do good. It isn't ego, that maybe even everything he's doing, it might be a situation of I'm trying to build up my own super squad to protect my community, because we can't always rely on big heroes like Superman to be there for us. So my community needs its own, and maybe that's what he's kind of experimenting with, or kind of giving his community a chance to kind of look after itself. Maybe that's his thinking. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But the villain with him, I didn't know this until I looked into it a little bit. I avoided reading too much, but the character, the one person that ultimately ended up killing Mayor Dean, we'll get to that in a second. Her name is Onomatopoeia. Kevin Smith brought this up on the most recent Fat Man Beyond, is that it's a character that him, and I was just looking at the name, is it Phil Hester or Phil? Yeah, Phil Hester. They made this character in the comics like over 20 years ago. The character came out like in 2002. Traditionally a Green Arrow and Batman villain, interesting enough. But yeah, he was just kind of like, oh wow, that's so cool that like a character I helped make is like, you know, being used. And obviously led to a whole conversation about like, oh yeah, like artists and comic book writers and artists being paid for the characters they create being used in other fashions, like, you know, the royalty aspect of it all. That's a whole other conversation that obviously it's not just a DC conversation, it's a Marvel conversation, because there's been talks about like where things kind of stand on those fronts, and those people not getting paid what they should be for that type of stuff, or like the royalties of that stuff. But either way, but I was like, oh, that's really interesting. It seems like, and once again, I did not look deeper into the character. I think the character might be traditionally a male, and maybe the gender swap situation in this. Or it could just be like, you know, there are multiple characters and like both heroes and villains, multiple people take up mantles. So like maybe there's like another onomatopoeia. Plus comics change stuff all the time, and, you know, shows when they do their adaptations like change stuff. So I mean, there might also be an even deeper reason why they did that too, because there might be even a deeper connection between onomatopoeia and Bruno. But when I heard the name Onomatopoeia, I was like, is that character's power what I think it's supposed to be? And I think Kevin had explained it, if I remember correctly. It's basically like you say a word, and that's why, like, oh, there was no bullets. It's like, oh, Mayor Dean seemed like he got shot with a shotgun. Home Dude last episode got riddled with bullets. It's because all onomatopoeia has to do is go bang, 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 and you're basically shooting someone without, you know, you're basically shooting someone with words. I'm like, because if I'm not mistaken, isn't one of Jane from Doom Patrol, wasn't one of her personalities kind of a similar thing? Except their situation, and maybe it's depicted differently for onomatopoeia in the comics, but at least with Jane in Doom Patrol, like I said, one of her personalities, when she says something, the words literally pop up in a certain font, and they become a weapon or something. They can kind of become a blade or whatever. So I wonder if that character kind of has like an onomatopoeia thing going on. But either way, she seems to be like, onomatopoeia seems to be the go-to assassin for Bruno, but it seems like there might be something deeper there. I don't know whether it's like Bruno's like the one in charge of this, or onomatopoeia is, or is it more of a team effort? Who knows? But yeah, onomatopoeia went after Dean because Dean knew something. Talking about the pride of Smallville, and sadly, Lana was on the phone with him when he died, and so you have, sadly, like, obviously Kyle's trying to like, hey, like, if you need to figure something out, like, you don't want to talk about it, like, I'm here. And who does she end up ultimately talking to is Henry Iron. So that's kind of leaning into like, there's definitely going to be something this season about that. But they ultimately ended up finding a file, but before they can even look at it, Onomatopoeia shows up, and apparently she's the one that ended up killing Henry Irons of this world. So it's like, oh, I know he's dead because I'm the one that killed him, but somehow I ran into him again in Smallville, so something's definitely going on here. So once again, like, obviously the way Dean was acting last episode, I was like, okay, he's like, you shouldn't have touched that money. It's for it has to be like something related to like funds. Like, I don't know if it's stuff that Bruno is laundering or because I guess like the moment that money was touched, it jeopardized everything Bruno and them were looking into, and maybe it might even been like maybe some protection money or something. I don't know what the full. Obviously, we're still early days in the season, so we have no idea the full scope of everything. But yeah. So there's that. There's also a little bit of Chrissy and Kyle, where it's like, she's like, yeah, I remember being in third grade when like Dean showed him, and Kyle's like, oh, so you're in third grade then. I thought that was going to be a larger conversation of like, wait, how old are you, Christy? Like, there might be like a bigger age gap between them, but maybe it's a thing of like, oh, you were in third grade then. Like, I don't know, like, because I don't know, I haven't looked into it. It's kind of not relevant, but I was just like curious, like, oh, was it, because I thought Kyle was kind of almost like, oh, wow, like, how much younger than me are you, or something like that. But I don't know if that was what that conversation was leading to, but it's like, oh, we kind of really didn't really get the whole knowing each other phase. I'm like, that's interesting, considering like you both have lived in Smallville for a while, that I'm like, maybe they just literally have never interacted before. That's why I'm wondering, like, did you guys ever go to school together or something like that, or what? Like, the fact is, like, she probably knows Kyle obviously through like Lana and stuff, but it's like, do we really know each other? We also don't know, like, Chrissy doesn't seem like, I mean, from what we've seen, we don't know if Chrissy really has any friends in Smallville. Like, she might have been a, like, keep to herself type of person. I'm trying to know if that's something they've covered over the past 2 seasons or not. But I was about to say, it's like, outside of, like, Lois and, like, in her family, like, I don't know if we've really seen Chrissy really, like, fully interact with other people outside of them. You know, because that was even why she was like, yeah, I'm at this, teenage birthday party because I literally had no other plans. I have no other life outside of work, you know? So, anyway. And speaking of life, we had the kids all going to a party. Obviously, Sarah playing Wing Woman, to, Natalie, like, goes to the party with her and hits it off with this kid, Mateo, who is like, which I'm also like, all right, is that, once again, my suspicion brain being like, is that going to be a larger plot point? Or is that just going to be a thing of, hey, normal Natalie living a normal life? It's just like the guy being like, oh yeah, like, you were at her school for one day and then you were gone. She was like, wait, he's like, yeah, because I knew you from school. And I was like, at first I was scared. I was like, wait, are we implying like, he knew like this world's not, but I'm like, no, like, obviously, like, Henry Irons never had any kids on this earth, obviously. But I was like, but it's like, no, like, you were at my school for a while. She's like, yeah, I was there for like maybe a day. And he's like, yeah, you were just this mysterious girl that was there 1 minute and kind of gone the next. I was like, the fact is he focused on the fact is that she was there for 1 minute and then kind of gone. I was like, it could just easily be the thing of like, oh yeah, you're like into someone, and like, once again, once someone's kind of a mystery and enigma, it just makes them like kind of stick in your head even more. So maybe that's all it was. But then once again, my suspicious brain of like, I just get suspicious about characters. Like, the fact is, I feel like there might be a little bit more to that. Once again, we don't know if that's just going to be the normal side of things of like, oh yeah, this is just part of Nat having a normal life, and maybe potentially balancing that with like the DOD and superhero stuff, or it's just kind of implying like, oh no, we're just, that's going to turn into something main plot-wise into, like, some of, like, the more superhero side of things. I don't know. Or maybe Mateo's going to get mixed up in everything. I don't know. Because that is in Metropolis, so... Which I guess this is going to be an even heavier Metropolis season because of that. Because obviously the past seasons have been a little Metropolis, but mainly Smallville. And I feel like, obviously, this might be flipping the script a little bit in that regard with Metropolis. But other than that... I also like that we're leaning into, like, Natalie being, like, the horror movie nerd that she is. I think that's kind of a neat little element. We're kind of learning more and more about her character so far this season. But obviously it's... once once again, Sarah and Natalie went there kind of on their own, and so did Jonathan and Jordan. But obviously, Jordan's kind of awkward because it's like, oh, I'm not really good at interacting with people. Oh, cool, Sarah's here. I'd rather give her a space, but she's like, yeah, I'm sorry, I made you feel like you had to avoid being around me. But it's like, I want us to be able to hang, like, be like with you, like the way you are with other people. I want to, I want to be like one of your friends. I just want to be like one of your besties, And it's like, yeah, like, figuring all that out is just kind of a complicated thing because it's like, yeah, neither one of them has been in that situation before of like, staying friends with an ex. Which I mean, hey, I've been there. I've not had the best track record. Like, I'm actually like envious of people who can make that stuff happen and work out. Never hasn't worked out. Just various circumstances have never worked out in my life when it came to being friends with an ex. Not saying it can't happen. It's just, I personally have just never had the best luck with it, but now that I'm older now, maybe I could, but So, but anyway, being a teenager dealing with all that, I thought that was just kind of interesting thing that I could kind of ultimately kind of connect with because, like, especially at that age, I definitely had complicated relationships with my exes, trying to stay friends, but whatever the case may be. And also, John showed up there because Eliza kind of invited him to the party. Because, hey, we started talking like a week ago and everything's cool. So, and then she gave you a gift. And the moment she gave you a gift, I was like, this feels like and even the fact she was like, well, no one has to find. I was like, didn't know. I think also for Jonathan, it's like, I've kind of screwed up a lot recently. I'm not trying to also go behind Candace's back and do all that. But she's like, right, like we were texting for a week or whatever. And it's like, you were texting with me. He was like, yeah, but I thought we were just friends. And she's like, well, we've never just been friends, Jonathan. You're like, wow. So he's like, yeah, I made a mistake. I need to get out of here. The party situation kind of blew up in their faces. I mean, Natalie's the only one that was having a great time. Sarah and Jordan were playing kind of beer pong. No beer involved on their side of things. They were being responsible. And ended up kind of starting some stuff. And Sarah threw beer in a douchebag. So I was like, hey. And once again, I think that shows a lot about Jordan's like growth and restraint, that he didn't try and pop off and show off in that moment. Easily could have been one of those things of like, oh, I can't believe you're here showing off again, Joe. He's already been down that route and he's growing and changing so much, especially as he's trying to be more responsible, proving that he can be Superboy, So I think a lot of that's kind of playing a role in it. Like, I was actually thinking like, oh yeah, the typical thing would be like have Jordan show, but he didn't. He just like, yo, we just had a normal teenage day. I did go back and freeze the douchebag's car, so there was that. But then they, heard the news about everything back at home about Mayor Dean, and obviously Sarah went home. She did lie to her mom about the party she was going to. She could have told her, but didn't. So, and because of all that, Lana's like, oh man, I kind of missed the signs because I was just that Sarah straight up lied to my face because I was too busy, dealing with the Dean situation of it. No, like Dean hadn't died yet, but she was sidetracked with the mayor stuff at the time because it's a lot. Work kind of fell on her lap with all of this. And so there's that. And then there's also, once again, circling back, the ending with Jordan and Jonathan, sitting down and them telling them about what's happening and them like hugging and holding their mom. Obviously was a beautiful thing. I believe that's how the episode ended. Yeah, I'm pretty sure, because I'm sure the onomatopoeia and Bruno stuff was like earlier. I think that is how you end the episode ended. And it's a very powerful way to end the episode too. Just kind of that being the start of the episode and the end of the episode. So, but yeah, I'm excited to see ultimately where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.